No one understands what makes Harry Potter so special, like, in a pop sense, right? I mean, you have all of these people coming out in the woodworks, making their hour-long presentations of deconstructing Harry Potter, explaining how, as it turns out, it's actually a really, really problematic series. This revelation of all of the misgivings of Harry Potter coming after people realized that Miss J.K. Rowling was a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. Now, of course, that label is hilariously misapplied and utterly ridiculous. However, it didn't stop people from looking back at Harry Potter and seeing all of the awful, problematic elements. And left leaning people do as they do, deconstruct things, found numerous different problematic elements in the story of Harry Potter. And I'm not kidding when I say there are multiple hour-long presentations explaining all of the bad, no good elements of this young adult book series. In fact, people's disdain for Miss Rowling and Harry Potter grew so much that some people have taken down some of their older reviews of the books and the movies. It's grown so bad that some people actually wanted to create a rather, well, hilariously failed boycott of the new Hogwarts Legacy game. I've considered picking it up myself, not because I want to stick it to the leftists, but because it actually kind of does look a little fun. But I don't know, jury's still out on that one. The point is, many of people have taken umbrage with Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, and it breaks my heart because Harry Potter is one of my favorite film and book franchises of all time. For one incredibly important reason. One of its greatest and strongest themes, which is something that is hilariously missed when I see all of the deconstructions of Harry Potter. No one analyzes what makes Harry, what makes his story so incredible, what makes it amazing. You know, I would see this take consistently. This lady distills it very well at the end of her video.
But I can't deny the role it has played in shaping people's lives. If you were a young queer kid and Harry and his friends were what first made you feel safe or hopeful or euphoric, if it was the first series that made you excited to read and engage with art, I'm not going to be the one to take that from you. And you know what? Joanne can't either. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about this. You're allowed to feel the hurt and the anger and the betrayal, and also the joy and the love. You're allowed to protect the things that are meaningful to you, even if now you see them in a different light. Even now that they've revealed to you that they aren't what you thought they were.
And I always thought that it was utterly ridiculous. Why, you may ask? Well, to walk away from Harry Potter being happy about the magical, mystical, wizarding world of all their different sorting hats and houses and games and imagination kind of leaves much on the table now, doesn't it? I would say the entire story that we witnessed. I mean, if you walk away from Harry Potter believing that it's a happy-go-lucky tale of wizardry and magic and incitement, then I'm not sure you and I read the same book series. Because I remember that there was this boy whose parents died when he was but a child, leaving him with a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead, who then spent the next 11 years of his life being mistreated by his closest living relatives. Only, of course, to then be told that he actually has magical abilities, and as such he goes to a school where dangerous things begin to happen to him. At one point in his first year, he ends up battling a troll with his best friend, and towards the end of that, he ends up playing a magical chess game. He also a magical chess game that had some pretty dire physical consequences, I might add. Of course, this culminating into a confrontation with the spirit of the very man who killed his parents 11 years ago. Or is it 10? Timeline's kind of off for me sometimes. Of course, his second year then leads him into battling a giant serpent that literally kills people that it looks at directly. Thank goodness no one looked at that thing directly. Of course, this giant creature, who of course could kill people if it just looked at them directly, was being controlled by the spirit of, oh, that's right, the person that tried to kill him 11 years ago, at least at this point in time. Of course, leading into his third year, where he ends up having this intense paranoia and fear of these ghoulish, Grim Reaper-esque creatures that literally suck the happiness out of you. Of course, withholding in his fourth year, he ended up having to engage in the Triwizard Cup, a hilariously advanced set of games that is supposed to be made for the top level students to compete in hilariously difficult challenges, one of which including battling a dragon to steal its egg, dealing with mermaids, and then going into this crazy maze, and withholding that the friend that helped him through all of that dies in front of his face. And then we move into his fifth year, where his one of his father figures dies in front of his face. And then we move into his sixth year, where again one of his father figures dies in front of his face. All culminating into one final confrontation with the man that began this cascading of suffering. Yeah, somehow in that tale of a book series, we get the happy-go-lucky woo of Quidditch and butterscotch beer and all the different houses and trivia games. But that's what leads me to why I love Harry Potter so much. Why I think Harry Potter is such a great book series. And that's its theme. What I imagine to be its most powerful theme, its most poignant theme. And it can be no better reflected in the final confrontation with Voldemort. You see, I was never really much of a fan of their final battle in the Deathly Hallows films. Because there's just a whole bunch of like woo and nonsense. They're flying about and all of this stuff, and they're casting spells and all of. And it's just a whole bunch of nonsense, right? It's a whole bunch of just over dramatic. You know, they're pointing their wands at each other so hard, and that's not what happened in the books. What happened in the book was much closer to a standoff. And all it really was is just Harry explaining to Voldemort why his plan didn't work. Why he couldn't win. And Voldemort, in his rage and his anger and his frustration, upon hearing that his plan couldn't work, and that the Elder Wand did not belong to him, still fires off a killing curse at Harry. And of course Harry responds with his trusty Expelliarmus. And what happens is the curse and Expelliarmus clash against each other, and the curse is redirected back to Voldemort, where it strikes him and he dies. An intense burst of action. Not all that flying around. But the thing is, the movie doesn't really do a great job of slowing down and allowing for the telling of the story to occur. For allowing Harry to explain the flaw in the plan. And that's one thing I really disliked about it. It's one thing that always bothered me after all these years. Because it's in that confrontation, it's in that explanation, do we understand or finally learn what the strongest theme of Harry Potter really is? Because when you think about it logically, that confrontation makes no sense. It's ridiculous. Think about it. Voldemort's older than Harry. He's stronger than Harry. He knows more spells than Harry knows. He knows more things than Harry knows. We saw Voldemort go toe-to-toe with Dumbledore 2 books or 2 movies previously. So how is it that this ultimate wizard, with the most powerful wand, is able to be bested by a 17-year-old who, by all accounts, is pretty gifted in his own right, nowhere near the same level as he is? How does Voldemort lose? Well, you see, my friends, that is what makes Harry Potter so special. Because when you think about it, Harry doesn't win because he's stronger than Voldemort. He doesn't win because he's smarter. He doesn't win because he's faster. He doesn't win because he knows a spell Voldemort doesn't know. Harry Potter wins because he had the one thing Voldemort didn't have. So let's explain it. Let's explain the flaw in the plan. The Elder Wand that Voldemort was trying to take control of could never be his. Why? Because the rules were very simple. Whoever owned the Elder Wand had to defeat the previous owner in a duel in order to transfer ownership to the other person. Voldemort believed that he was able to do that because he killed Severus Snape, except that wasn't really accurate at all. In fact, control over the Elder Wand could never be in possession of Voldemort because of the plan that Dumbledore, the original owner of the wand, and his double agent Snape came up with. A plan that is so interesting and subtle that if you blinked, you kind of missed a lot of the critical details. If you go back to the Half-Blood Prince, the assassination of Dumbledore that happened, you'll notice a very critical element here. Again, very subtle. If you blink, you miss it. But when it comes to Dumbledore being disarmed, he wasn't disarmed or defeated by Severus Snape. He was disarmed by Draco Malfoy. And per the rules of the Elder Wand, the ownership of it then transferred to Draco. And of course, when we get into the Deathly Hallows, we find something interesting happens. Weeks before we get to this confrontation with Voldemort, who defeats Draco in the duel? Harry Potter. Defeats his longtime rival in a random battle. I think in a bar somewhere. I don't even remember where it took place. I mean, just the fact that the elements here were just so subtly placed is amazing to me. But Harry defeats Draco, and I think for the rest of the book, he ends up using Draco's wand, if I remember correctly. And we go through the rest of the story. The plan to make sure Voldemort could never own the wand had been a success. Planned not by Harry, but by Dumbledore and Snape. It's pretty interesting. So when we finally get to our final confrontation with Voldemort, a couple of elements have to be explained. Again, one of the most important ones was one of the main through lines of the book, one of the main plots, the destruction of the Horcruxes, different elements of Voldemort's soul embedded into objects or into people that would keep him alive and protect him from being killed again. One of the most interesting things about Harry Potter is we were first told that there were 7 Horcruxes that needed to be destroyed, but in reality, there was an 8th one, and that 8th Horcrux was Mr. Potter himself. An element that had existed since the series began, this connection between Harry and Voldemort, was in plain sight the entire time. So when it's revealed that he indeed was the 8th Horcrux, it almost seemed a bit obvious. And it made so much sense to the prophecy that was foretold, that one of them had to die for the other to live. That's what it meant. When Voldemort killed Harry in the forest, when Harry went to go sacrifice himself and die, the part that was killed was the Horcrux of Voldemort. That's why Harry was able to come back to life. This connection that they had this entire time finally severed in that moment. Why? Because Harry was willing to sacrifice himself. When you combine everything together, what you have is a showcase of Harry Potter's greatest theme. And that, my friends, is love. Love is such a poignant and powerful theme in Harry Potter. Now, we literally have a scene where Dumbledore breaks down and explains just how much he loves Harry. There's a chapter where Snape's life flashes before his eyes, and we see how much he loved Lily. And of course, withholding the entire journey in the 7th book of Ron and Hermione standing by Harry to do something that they really don't have any obligation to do. I mean, Voldemort's not after them. Yeah, but I guess just being a generally good person, you would want to stop, Wizard Hitler. They cared about him. They stuck by him. They protected him throughout the books, even when, again, they don't have any obligation to do so. Why? Because they love him. And in Harry being loved by other people, Harry himself also has love for other people. Again, if Harry wasn't willing to sacrifice himself for the people he cared about, they never would have killed that part of the Horcrux that was attached to Harry. And as such, if they would have destroyed all the other 7 Horcruxes and Harry still was alive, Voldemort could never be defeated. But because Harry loved his friends, he loved his family so much, he was willing to sacrifice himself for them. The theme of love is so integral to Harry Potter that it can be found even before the story begins. Remember, Harry was alive because his mother loved him so much he sacrificed himself for her, and as such created a protective spell or barrier that kept him safe from Voldemort's killing curse. In fact, when Harry sacrificed himself, he ended up creating the same barrier or spell, if you will, that protected Hogwarts. It's part of the reason why they were able to defeat the Death Eaters so handily for most of their confrontation. Love is so poignant a theme in Harry Potter that it can even be seen in the relationship between Harry and Voldemort themselves. In fact, Harry is a showcase of how different Voldemort's life could have been if he too had love. Harry too being an abandoned orphan in an abusive household comes out kind, courageous, and loving because he received love, whereas Voldemort, well, he didn't. Even Voldemort's conception of being born to, if I remember correctly, some random woman or some random whore is in stark contrast to Harry's conception of being with 2 married people who loved each other profusely. The interesting thing about the theme of Harry Potter is that it's so strong that the splitting of Harry, despite all the similarities to Voldemort, is a showcase of just how different your life is when you have love, when you have support, when you have people that care about you. Harry has so many attributes that are the same to Voldemort, so many links, so many things that connect them. The wand that Harry uses for most of the series is the brother wand to Voldemort's. Again, 2 orphans, abused and mistreated. One becoming a megalomaniac. The other, a kind, courageous young man who seeks to protect people. Love is what splits the difference between these 2 very similar people. You see, my friends, at the end of it all, Harry doesn't defeat Voldemort because he's stronger than him. He doesn't win because he's smarter. He doesn't win because he's faster or because he has some spell that Voldemort doesn't have. At the end of it all, Harry Potter wins because he had the one thing Voldemort didn't have. And that's love. And if you think that that is an incredibly feminine theme, well, I would like to remind you that J.K. Rowling is, well, a woman. So let's see how many people get the nuance of that statement. So that being said, I still hope you guys got something out of today's video. And if you did, go ahead and click the like button. Shoot, go and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.